All righty. Some of you still here. That's awesome. The second hour. I love that term that was just used. I think if my sponsor would have thought about that, that's what he would have called me. Sexual terrorist, relationship terrorist. But, thank God I don't have to be that anymore, and I am not. My behavior did not change immediately when I came into AA. My sponsor was very firm with me. I was told I could not sit with the guys. And I had a very strong sponsor. I would throw back at him, well, I'm sitting there first. What if they come and sit next to me? And the response was, you get up and move next to a woman or come sit next to me. I mean, I didn't get by with anything. And at the beginning, like I said, when I came in, it would be me and this little herd of guys, cause I would attach myself. In AA, an old timer once called me that I was a psychic vampire, in relation to this, because I came in very broken and very used, and I would latch on, in these relationships and in this area. But this was the beginning of the change. It took me a little while, in sobriety to, see some changes, but I started, growing towards what we call our sex ideal. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to take our inventory and all the yuckiness of that, and it's going to be changed and transformed into an ideal that we get to grow towards. And here's the thing. We look back in order to see, to use the looking back to creating a better future. If I was successful in this area and completely happy and satisfied, I guess I wouldn't need to do this. But I longed for a loving relationship that had true intimacy, that was no longer a transaction. And what I mean by transaction, I'm going to divert a little bit to explain that, because there was so many ways my relationships were always transactions. But one easy example would be when I would get into a relationship. I didn't understand what love was. And a typical conversation would be, okay, I don't like the in-laws or his family or whatever, as an example, and yet I need to show up for Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever it is. I'm drinking, don't want to deal with this, don't want to go there, but I gotta look good, and I don't seem to know how to get out of it, so I go. And I spend 3 days at my partner's family's, the holidays. Then let's fast forward a month. And I have a work function, a business function. And it says you +1. And so I go to my partner and I say, hey, I got this business dinner. Would you like to come with me? Because I'm nice at first, just like the director in step 3. At first, I'm going to be nice and kind, even self-sacrificing until that doesn't work. And then you're going to see the other side of me. But, so I'll say, would you like to come with me? And my partner, as is his prerogative, says, no, thank you. No, thank you. Well, that's not acceptable to me at this point. So I'm still nice, but now it's like, now I start the begging, oh, come on. Why don't you want to come? It's just for an hour. Can you please? So right away, I'm violating his boundaries. He just said, no, thank you. And now I'm pushing. I need something. I don't want to go alone. I simply don't want to go alone. I may look bad. People will think, whatever reason. Oh, come on, please, just come with me, just for an hour. It'll be fun. I promise. All this stuff. And he goes, no, thank you. And then this is where, I don't understand love. I don't understand that he gets to be him and I get to be me. And so then I'll say, now here comes the transaction. I went and spent 3 days with your family over Thanksgiving and I didn't even want to. And you can't even show up for an hour to help me out. And then it's on. Then it's on. So, I want a relationship where, there is love, not transaction, where, we don't consider each other just simply an extension of, I don't consider him an extension of me, his own person. I want to have true intimacy and safety and all these things in there. I want to be a complete person before I try to connect with another person. I don't want to seek my worth and my value in another flawed human being, because that isn't safe. They're all, I let people down and other people are going to let me down. So I want, I want our higher power, I want to shift my worth to my higher power and come into this relationship a complete person with my inventory and my ideal intact, so I can bring the best Judith that I am meant to be. I don't know if I shared this. I'm losing track of what I've said, but I didn't know who that was. And during my inventory, because of what I use, at work to get ahead, my sponsor looked at me and said, what happens when Judith is no longer cute? And that may not mean anything to you guys, but that was like a cold knife in my heart. I was a lot younger then. And it's like, what happens when Judith is no longer cute? And in that moment, I had a moment of clarity and I looked inside and I saw just a black void. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where my worth came from. I didn't know where I was, why I was valuable. And I had spent my entire life hustling for worthiness from everything, especially men. And it scared me to death. What happens when Judith is no longer cute? Because it's gonna happen. And where's my value then? Where's my worth? How am I going to get my ego stroking? How am I ever going to seek attention, or get the attention? And I knew in that moment, I better take this serious or you're going to see a very pathetic, I'm 56 now. And I don't want to be a 56-year-old who is acting and dressing and behaving like a 22-year-old. But that is what will happen to me. I'm jumping ahead a little bit. But if I don't address this, I'm going to continue to harm myself and harm my relationships, because I'm continually seeking and grasping the external. So let's jump into the ideal. So you have your inventory, and the next paragraph after it says, I'm on page 69, we got all this down on paper and we looked at it. I had to see the truth in how I had been showing up in order to move forward. I had to look at the past in order to create a better future. And then so the next paragraph says, in this way we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal. Sound meaning like a foundation. It's sound. It's not going to crumble. It's firm. It's got some substance to it. It needs to be workable and sane. It needs to be sane. And that reminds us of step 2. We need to be restored to sanity, and we do, and then it appears again in step 11 where it says, by this time sanity will have returned. So at this point in the process, I'm not yet sane. So thank goodness for a sponsor that can help me with this. So I want to shape a sane ideal. And how do I do that? I can't rely on my thinking. I can't rely on my feelings. So what I need to rely on are the spiritual principles contained in this book. And that's what I'm going to rely on for our future sex life. So we're asking, I gotta skip around a little bit and hit the highlights. But we're asking God, because we're not yet sane, we're asking God to mold our ideals and to help us live up to them. And then skipping down to the next paragraph, whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must, and I always circle the must, we must be willing to grow towards it. So it doesn't do any good for me to write a bunch of garbage on a piece of paper to just check off an assignment. This must be something that is meaningful to me, that I'm willing to grow towards. Okay, so here's the ideal, or here's what we did. This is how I did my sane and sound ideal. I took all that list of what I should have done instead. I took it and I flipped it to the positive of things I could grow towards. Okay? It's not where I'm at. Now here's the problem that I've seen so often in the fellowship. People will make a list of what type of partner they're looking for, as though it is, okay, my ideal partner is tall, dark, and handsome. He's honest. He's funny. He likes outdoors, yada, yada, yada. That's not what it says. We're addressing our conduct. So it's not that. And it also is not, okay, I want my relationship, the next relationship, I want it to have honesty. I want it to have a sense of, that we can laugh together. I want, all these things that I want in a relationship. That's not what it refers to at all. This is still focusing on my conduct, something that I can grow towards. Okay? So here's the deal with, I don't know if you're like me, but my tendency is, this is the baseline and I put, I will not, or a list of thou shalt not, and I make a mistake, I've just screwed up. I've already failed. I'm once again, Judith is messed up. And so I may as well just go for it anyway. Does that remind you of something? It reminds of my drinking and Bill. So, how did I take this first drink? Pounding on the bar. How did this happen? Oh, well, I'm here. I may as well get good and drunk anyway. That seems to be, how we react to our mistakes when it is just, thou shalt not, or I will not. We have nowhere to grow. If we make that mistake, it's viewed, I view it as I've failed. Again, what's the use? This doesn't work. So on. So when drafting my sane and sound ideal, I put it in the positive, something I can grow towards, because I'm going to make a mistake. So I may not have a straight line up to my ideal. It may look like one of those graphs that go up and down, up and down. I make mistakes, I get up. I make mistakes, I get up. But I'm still moving towards my ideal. And So it's a goal. It's an ideal of where I want to be and who I want to be. So we take all those things I should have done instead, and we flip them to something that is positive. And it's not easy to do. I find this, and when I work with sponsees and other people, it's so easy to make a list of don'ts. But it's more challenging to say what I will do, because in 6 and 7, we don't focus on our character defects. Those are for God to remove. What we focus on is growing the assets. Okay? If I'm having trouble with selfishness, I don't sit there and say, oh, I need to be less selfish. I'm so selfish. I need to be less selfish. No. That's for God to deal with. What I do is I take action. This is a program of action, and I practice the opposite. I may practice service. Same concept here. I practice who I want to grow towards, who I want to be for my future. So, for an example, back to Bob, the coworker, some of the things that were on my what I should do instead is I shouldn't, go out to drinks. I should, whatever. So I would take that and I would write on my sex ideal something similar to I will contact and interact with men at an appropriate time and place. Something as simple as that. Or I will always. And that involves so many things. It comes into play in AA. Because I've used this. I've had sponsees that have used this. We come into AA and we really connect. We connect with people. And I just need someone to talk to. And there's that guy. Now, if I'm in a relationship or that person's in a relationship, here's the danger. If our partners are in or out of AA, here we are, we're gone a lot. We're going to these meetings with a whole bunch of strangers, and all of a sudden now we're hanging out and going to coffee one-on-one with a guy. How much jealousy, bitterness, and suspicion does that cause my partner who's not in AA? Do I have I could say, well, I have a legitimate reason to be in there. We're talking about AA. Is that really, I need to look at the dishonesty in that. I have a sponsor. I have other women that I need to learn to be friends with, but I don't want to go to coffee with women. They're boring, right? They're not going to stroke my ego. So I got to really do some inventory and some honesty of, is it appropriate for me if I or the other person is in a relationship to meet for coffee? And so for me, when it says I will interact with men at appropriate times, for appropriate reasons, hanging out at Denny's after a meeting at night or at any other time for me, this is my ideal, is not appropriate. Unless we have legitimate business, like if we're on a committee, but even then it's a little sketchy for me. Okay. I have to be careful because I don't want to be the person that creates jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness anymore. I just don't. I want to be so considerate of women and my partner. Okay. So I will not, there are times where I do have legitimate business with guys that I have to be alone with, but my partner knows when. Not that I have to ask permission, but I am courteous now. I am sensitive now to let them know where I'm going to be, how long I'm going to be there, and why I'm going to be there. I just think that's common courtesy, because I wouldn't want my partner to be out having coffee with someone either. Not someone like me, right? So that's one example. Another is, it would involve, when I say I will, have communication or contact with men at appropriate times and at appropriate, in appropriate ways. That also means I will only message or text a male at appropriate hours, maybe business hours, not at 10 at night, because even if it's legitimate reason, it's not an appropriate time. I don't want to cause suspicion or bitterness. And any message I ever send to a guy, I imagine it being put on Facebook, and would I want the world to see it? So on my sex ideal, it is, I will communicate and interact with men in appropriate ways at appropriate times. And I grow towards that. And here's when it's difficult. When it's difficult is when I'm alone, afraid, bored, insecure, or I've just had a fight with my partner. And I know how to get my ego stroked, and all I have to do is shoot a message to some guy saying, hey, been thinking about you, how you doing? Is there anything innately wrong with that message? No, it's not. But why am I doing it? And again, it's me trying to seek something, and instead of doing a step 10 or taking care of my spiritual condition, I'm using one of God's kids selfishly to meet my own needs without any regard for anyone else involved. So that has cut down a lot of my texting. Just saying. But I have been guilty of that in sobriety, in recovery, because I do get afraid. I do get bored. It's like, dang, I'm getting old. One thing so women, there's so many women on my sex inventory because of what I've done in this area. And so on my sex ideal, I take all those negative things and I flip it to the positive, and I have things such as, I will learn to be a good friend to women. I had to learn that. I don't even know how. I have on there, I will support, uplift, encourage other women. And in there I have a little thing, I promote other women. I want, instead of having to be the center of attention, I make it a point to actively try and allow another woman to shine. Another thing that I have on my sex ideal is that I will seek my worth and value from my higher power. Fundamental for me. I also have on there, I will spend as much time on my inner spiritual beauty as I do, I said time and money. I will spend as much time and money on my inward spiritual beauty as I do on my external. And today I can tell you that I do more on the internal than the external. Here's a shocker, one that a lot of people that they find odd. I put on my sex ideal, I will grow old gracefully with God. Because as I shared, I sort of jumped ahead, and as I shared before, if the outward package is the only commodity I have to trade, the only commodity, as I grow old, I lose that commodity. And then you're going to see a desperate older woman who is going to spend a lot of money that I don't have, undoing, whatever I need to do. I will be showing up dressed very inappropriately, which I used to do when I came to AA to get that attention. I will start flirting again. You will start seeing me act out in desperation, act out sexually. I could go so far as to have an affair or hook up with a young 20-something-year-old to prove I've still got it, man. I still got it. And intellectually knowing all along, that doesn't mean anything. 20-year-olds, male or female, many of us will sleep with anyone. It doesn't mean anything. But I will use that. I will start acting out to show that I'm still of value. So so on there I put, I will grow old gracefully with God and all that entails. And that's sometimes difficult in this society for me because it seems as though we worship youth and beauty. And if that is where my value comes from, I'm screwed. So I remember that I'm God's girl. Okay. So, another thing that I have on my sex ideal is that, I think I said that I will remember that I'm married, and there's a lot of, subparts to that I have, in my conversation, how I conduct myself in my messages, things like that. Okay. I want to share with you, and this was given to me with permission. I know it looks like we have females, but for any guys, that are still brave enough to be here today, I wanted to share a sex ideal that a young man sent me, and who we went through this process. I don't sponsor him, but went through this process, and I wanted to give an idea of a male sex ideal after going through, and he said this transformed his life. So his sex ideal says, I will be of service to others. Number 2, all my actions will be guided by spiritual principles. Okay? The term friends with benefits. Can you tell me any spiritual principles that informs that behavior? If you can, it maybe you can. But I would love to discover what, just friends with benefits, which means to me, I use you and you use me. And today I am no longer willing to selfishly use one of God's kids for my own selfish designs. Number 3, I will know my value is in my Creator. Number 4, I will remember that sex is God-given. Number 5, I will remember that people are God's children. Number 6, this was interesting. We had this, he was single. We had a very interesting conversation. I will take responsibility for my own birth control. When I take a sponsee through this, and if they're single, we will talk about what is the purpose for dating, because this involves your sex ideal. What are you doing? If our primary purpose, according to the big book, is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and God's kids, it says to God and our fellows about us. But if that's my primary purpose, what is my purpose for dating? Does it enhance this ultimate primary purpose, or does it detract from it, or actually even hinder it or destroy it? Today, the only reason I will be in a relationship is that it fits me to be of maximum service to God and my fellows. The only way I will take a job is if that job fits me to be of maximum service, whether I'm sweeping the floor of a convenience store or being some big time lawyer or judge. Whatever I do, my primary purpose is to fit myself to be of maximum service. So is that why I date? Why am I dating? So we'll have this conversation. Then we roll into, when is sex or physical intimacy appropriate? And this is the person's own. We aren't the arbiter of someone's sex ideal or conduct. But these are questions and conversations to have. When is it appropriate? And I have sponsees that have everywhere from 3 weeks to waiting until I'm married. It has to be their ideal with their higher power, and everything in between. 3 months, 6 months, a committed relationship. Well, this young man said to me, well, sex when, if I'm in a committed relationship, and he was just entering into what he said, a committed relationship. So they were having sex. And I said, fantastic. Committed relationship. Wonderful. How committed? What if she got pregnant? Are you committed to staying there and raising that child? Are you committed to being a family for the rest of that child's life? Are you committed to supporting? Are you ready and able to support? How committed? And it really took him by surprise. He said committed, but then when I threw in the kid, wait a minute, am I that committed? So then on his sex ideal, he put, I will be responsible for my own birth control, because he realized, okay, I want to have sex. I feel like I'm committed, but I'm not that committed. I don't want that. So it's all interesting of how people do this. Number 7, I will use my gifts to serve God's will. Number 8, he liked what I had said in a workshop. I will grow old in God's image, because I didn't realize this, but men are just as vain as we are, women. And, they want to prove their whatever, just like I want to prove things. And so he put that on his as well. Number 9, he put, I will be safe. I will be as safe for women to be around as I would for my sisters. How beautiful is that in AA? We need a safe place. A lot of us women and men come into AA at being terribly hurt in this area, terribly harmed and broken in this area, having been victims in some way sexually. And he wanted to be as safe for women to be around as he would for his sisters. I think that's absolutely beautiful. He put in, I will communicate with women at appropriate time and manner. He borrowed that one from me. And this was beautiful. I will value women's friendships, and I will treasure my partner. Because what we talked about is he has a lot of friendships in AA. His partner was not in AA. And he didn't want to have to pick and choose, like, oh, now I can't be friends with women. It's like, okay, let's explore, let's flesh this out a little bit. And so what he came up with is, yes, he will value these friendships in AA, but he's going to treasure his partner. There's a vast difference between valuing and treasuring. At least it was to him. I forgot to add one that was on my sex ideal, and that is I will guard my relationship from threats within and without. Meaning I can be the biggest threat to my relationship, but also I will guard against any temptation from without as well. they are threats to my relationship. So I will guard against any threats to my relationship from within and without. And then last he put, I will value sex as a safe and intimate place between me and my partner. And that came about because he had quite an issue with porn. And he started feeling, and many people of us have experienced this, women and men that I've worked with. And it has harmed their relationship. I'm not placing a judgment, again, not an arbiter of anyone's conduct, but for some, it is an issue and it has harmed relationships. And so they are addressing it on their sex ideal. And so what he is saying here is that he values sex as a safe and intimate place between him and his partner. No one else is invited anymore, whether on video, porn, or any other way, because he had some issues with that. And he no longer wants to bring anything else into their intimacy. And so that was his sex ideal on that. All right, I want to leave some time for questions. But there's a few more things that I want to address. And again, I want to point out that we must be willing to grow towards this. Now again, it's not, for me, it wasn't a straight line. It was more like a graph, up, down, up, down, up, down, as I grew towards it, but it's up, down, up, down. I make mistakes, and I love how the big book acknowledges the fact that there's people like me that make mistakes and fall far short of the ideal, because again, it's not where I'm at now, it's who I want to be in the future. And so it talks about a couple things. One, we're going to get into the mistakes, but before we move to the mistakes, it says that we ask God. So there's a lot of prayers involved in this whole process. And one prayer that I have latched on that was given to me by a friend, one prayer that has become central to me in my sex ideal is the following. And it says, the prayer is, and its relations to my partner, God, help me love him today in such a way that he knows you love him. That keeps me very busy all the time. Oh my gosh, that I am to live in such a way that I am a reflection to that other person, that there is a higher power that loves them. God, help me love him today in such a way that he knows you love him. My first response is, what an order. I can't go through with it. But it has been such a blessing and it's such a wonderful prayer to pray for my partner. So in meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. And it's talking about if, the harm that we've done, or if we're in a relationship, stuff like that. It says here, this is a promise. This is a promise from the sex ideal. The right answer will come. That's a promise, come. But there is a condition. And the condition is that little if we want it. And I find often I don't want the answer. I want to do what I want, when I want, and how I want, and as often as I want. And the only time I don't bring something to my sponsor is when I suspect my sponsor will stand in my way. The answer will come. That's a promise. If I want it. Do I want it? Do I really want to grow towards my sex ideal? that is some questions that I need to ask myself. So then, what I was saying is I love how the big book recognizes that I'm going to stumble. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm human. I'm going to fall short of this ideal. Otherwise, I haven't set my ideal, high enough. I think if I'm already hitting it, I can always have room to grow, room for improvement. So it says, are we going to get drunk if we fall short of our ideal? And, it says, no, it's like no. It depends on my motive. And it takes a lot of honesty. I can BS my way. I can con myself. I can be delusional sometimes. I can try and con others, but the one thing I can't con or cheat is my alcoholism. And it is there waiting for me. And if I do not change my behavior and I continue to hurt people, I am quite sure to drink again. If I'm not changing anything and turning this over to my higher power, for me in this area, and I continue to harm the wonderful people about me, I will drink again. I will separate myself. I will lose friendships. I will become isolated. I will be shame. I will be full of shame again and guilt and remorse, and I will pick up. So, but it says if we are sorry and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven and have learned our lesson. And here's the idea that is pivotal for me. I cannot just say I'm sorry, but cause my words, my sorry mean nothing at this point. But I need to be willing to change my behavior. And that has been a struggle early on in sobriety to change my behavior. So here's there's so much and I'm running out of time. This is just the beginning. There's so much more. So much more. One last thing, it's a little illustration. If you imagine a triangle, okay? And in every relationship, there's three people or three entities in a triangle. This is what I like to keep in mind, okay? Not in the big book per se, but I think it's supported by the big book. But I believe there's three entities, God, myself, and the other person, and that's it. In any relationship or friendship or work, anything, right? There's three of us. And I put God on the top and one person, myself on this bottom corner and the other person in the other bottom corner. And here's the thing that I use in my ideals, my sex ideal, is if both, okay, this over in this end, there's a person in this end, and there's a long distance between us at the bottom of the triangle. There's a long distance. But as I grow towards the top of the triangle, towards seeking my higher power, and if my partner is growing towards seeking their higher power and they're going up the triangle towards the higher power, you see the distance between the two close. There's less of a distance between the two as they go to the top of the triangle towards the higher power. So instead of me trying to seek the other person and making that my motivation at the bottom of the triangle and trying to all my identity and seeking myself in another person, that distance remains very wide at the bottom of the triangle. But as we both grow towards our higher power to the top of the triangle, the distance decreases between us and we get to experience deeper and more real intimacy when God is at the top, when our higher power is at the top of the triangle. So I just like that little visual to keep in mind of what my priority is. It's not seeking the other person, but it's always seeking God. So much more in this whole thing, but I had to really cut corners and try and do the best I can with the time allotted. All right. Thank you all for joining me. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Debbie. for sharing and asking me to do this, and I really appreciate it. So let's just wrap it up with a prayer that's very important to me, and that is the 7-step prayer. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all.